She had always lived quietly. Even after marriage placed her inside a powerful family. From the outside, her life looked simple. She woke up early, made tea, kept the house calm, and spoke only when needed. She never raised her voice. She never tried to prove anything. People often mistook her silence for weakness, and she learned long ago not to correct them. The house she lived in was large, expensive, and full of rules. Every corner reflected wealth, but none of it felt like home to her. The walls carried heavy silence, broken only by polite conversations and careful laughter. She moved through those rooms like a guest who stayed too long, always respectful, always invisible. Her husband came from a family that valued status above all else. His mother controlled everything. She controlled the servants, the schedule, the guests, and even the way people smiled at dinner. Nothing happened in that house without her approval. To her, people had value only if they were useful. From the first day of marriage, the mother never liked her. She believed the woman had married into the family by luck, not worth. She saw no powerful family name, no public success, no signs of ambition. Just a quiet woman with soft eyes and plain clothes. That was enough for judgment. The mother often spoke about respect, but what she really meant was obedience. She expected the daughter-in-law to blend into the background, to be grateful, and to never ask questions. When the woman followed these rules, it only made a mother more convinced that she was insignificant. At family gatherings, relatives whispered behind their smiles. They spoke about how lucky she was, how she had married well, how she should be thankful for the life she was given. No one ever asked her what she wanted. No one cared to know. She listened to all of it without reacting. She had trained herself to do that long before she entered this family. Listening without responding was something she learned early in life. It kept her safe. It kept her focused. Her husband rarely defended her. He was not cruel, but he was weak. He avoided conflict, especially with his mother. When his wife was ignored or spoken down to, he would look away or change the topic. Silence became his answer. At night, when the house finally slept, she sat alone by the window. She watched the city lights in the distance and allowed herself a few quiet breaths. These moments were hers. No rules, no eyes watching. People assumed she had nothing of her own. No career, no ambition, no future without the family name. What they never saw were the calls she took in private, the emails she answered with calm focus, or the documents she reviewed when everyone else slept. Her phone was always on silent. No flashy cases, no expensive displays. Just a simple device that carried a world no one else knew about. When it vibrated, she checked it carefully, always making sure she was alone. Years earlier, long before marriage, she had learned how quickly power can change people. She had watched trusted adults fight over money and control. She had seen love turn into greed overnight. That lesson stayed with her. She promised herself that if she ever had power, she would protect it quietly. She would never let it become her identity. She would never let it control her. So she built her life in layers. One layer was what the world could see. Calm, ordinary, predictable. The other layer was private, protected by law, by distance, and by careful planning. Only a few professionals knew the full picture, and even they never spoke her name publicly. She did not hide because she was afraid. She hid because she understood something others didn't. The loudest person in the room is rarely the most powerful. Inside the family, the pressure slowly increased. The mother began making comments more openly. She questioned her usefulness. She hinted that the marriage had been a mistake. She reminded everyone how much the family had given her. During dinners, the woman stayed quiet, her hands folded neatly. She listened as the mother praised others, spoke proudly of future plans, and ignored her presence completely. The message was clear. She did not belong. Her husband felt the tension but chose comfort over courage. He told himself things would improve. He believed time would fix what honesty could not. The woman never argued. She never begged. She never tried to earn approval. Deep inside, she knew approval built on power could be taken away at any moment. Still, she did her part. She showed respect. She followed traditions. She kept the peace. Not because she feared them, but because she valued stability. What no one noticed was how calm she remained even as the atmosphere grew colder. She was not confused. She was not lost. She was aware. She had seen signs. The sudden meetings between her husband and his mother, the quiet phone calls that stopped when she entered the room, the way her husband avoided eye contact during serious conversations. She understood what was coming long before anyone handed her anything, yet she continued her routine. Morning tea, polite smiles, silent evenings. To outsiders, she looked unaware. To herself, she was simply patient. There is a certain strength in waiting when you already know the truth. She carried that strength quietly. The family believed they were in control. They believed she depended on them. They believed removing her would cost them nothing. They were wrong. But part one of her story was never about money or power. It was about how easily people judge silence, how quickly they underestimate calm, how dangerous it is to assume that someone who says little knows little. As the days moved forward, the tension thickened. The mother's tone sharpened. Her husband grew distant. The house felt less like a home and more like a courtroom waiting for judgment. And through it all, the woman stayed exactly the same. Quiet, observant, steady. Because when the moment finally came, when papers were placed in her hands and eyes turned to watch her reaction, she would not be surprised. She would be ready. And no one in that room had any idea who they were really dealing with. The day it happened began like any other. There was no warning in the air, no sign that everything was about to change. The morning light entered the house softly, touching the floors and walls the same way it always did. She woke up early, prepared tea, and moved to the kitchen quietly. The house felt tense, but tension had lived there for a long time. She had learned not to question it. Her husband barely spoke during breakfast. He scrolled through his phone, nodding now and then, avoiding her eyes. She noticed it, of course. She noticed everything, but she said nothing. Silence had become the safest language between them. Later that day, the mother announced a family gathering. She said it casually, like it was nothing special. Her voice carried authority, not warmth. When she spoke, people listened. No one asked why. No one ever did. The gathering was set in the large living room. Chairs were arranged neatly. Relatives arrived dressed well, carrying polite smiles and hidden curiosity. Conversations filled the room, low and controlled. Everyone seemed to know something important was about to happen, except her. She entered the room calmly, dressed simply, her posture straight. Some eyes followed her. Others looked away. A few people whispered, pretending they weren't. She took her seat without reacting. The mother sat at the center, her expression firm, her hands resting confidently in her lap. She did not greet her daughter-in-law. Instead, she waited until everyone settled. The room grew quiet. The mother stood up and cleared her throat. Her voice was sharp, practiced. She spoke about family honor, about tradition, about how some mistakes cannot be ignored forever. Each word felt carefully chosen, like a speech she had rehearsed many times. The woman listened calmly. Her face showed no emotion. She had heard similar words before, just never spoken so openly. Then the mother turned toward her, without anger, without hesitation. She held out a folder, thick, official, heavy with meaning. "These are for you," the mother said. The room froze. She looked down at the folder, then back up at the mother. Slowly, she reached out and took it. Her hands were steady. She did not rush. She did not pull away. Someone gasped quietly. Another person shifted uncomfortably in their seat. The mother continued speaking, explaining how the marriage was no longer suitable, how it was best for everyone if things ended cleanly. She spoke as if she were discussing business, not a life. Her husband remained seated. He said nothing. His eyes were fixed on the floor. The papers were divorce documents, handed to her in front of everyone. The humiliation was intentional. She opened the folder slowly. She scanned the pages, not because she needed to read them, but because she wanted to understand the moment. She wanted to see how far they were willing to go. No one spoke. All eyes were on her, waiting for tears, anger, or pleading. None came. She closed the folder gently and placed it on her lap. "I see," she said softly. That was all. Her calm unsettled the room more than shouting ever could. The mother frowned slightly, as if disappointed by the lack of reaction. The mother continued, saying the family had already decided. There would be no discussion, no delays. Everything had been arranged. The woman nodded once. She did not argue. She did not ask for mercy. She did not look at her husband. People whispered again. Some felt pity. Others felt satisfaction. A few felt nervous without knowing why. The mother believed she had won. After the gathering ended, people left quietly, avoiding eye contact. No one offered comfort. No one dared to speak against the decision. Her husband followed her back to their room. The silence between them was heavy. I didn't know how to stop her, he said quietly. She looked at him for a long moment, not with anger, not with sadness, just understanding. You didn't try, she replied. He had no answer. She packed only a few things. Clothes, personal items, nothing more. The rest of the house had never belonged to her anyway. As she walked through the hallway for what might be the last time, she felt no fear, only clarity. The mother watched from a distance, her expression unreadable. She expected begging. She expected negotiation. She expected tears. She got none. That night, the woman stayed elsewhere, in a quiet place away from the family, alone for the first time in a long while. She sat on the edge of the bed and allowed herself to breathe. She did not cry. Instead, she reached for her phone. Messages were waiting. Missed calls. Updates. Numbers that meant nothing to anyone else, but everything to her. She read them carefully. The next step had begun. For years, she had prepared for moments like this. Not because she expected betrayal, but because she understood human nature. Power makes people careless. Pride makes them blind. The divorce papers were not a surprise. They were confirmation. Confirmation that her patience had reached its purpose. She sent a short reply. Simple. Professional. Then she placed the phone down and stared ahead. The family believed they had ended her story. In truth, they had only finished their own chapter. Part 2 of her life had begun the moment those papers touched her hands. And no one in that house realized how much they had just lost. The place she stayed that night was quiet and simple. No large rooms. No staff moving around. Just silence. The kind that allows thoughts to settle instead of echo. She sat near the window for a long time, watching the city breathe below her. Cars moved. Lights blinked. Life continued. Unaware of the shift that had just happened in her world. For the first time in years, there was no pressure to wake up early for anyone else. No expectations. No rules written by other people. That alone felt strange. She didn't sleep much. Not because she was upset, but because her mind was active, clear, focused. In the early hours of the morning, she made a cup of tea and sat with it, letting the warmth ground her. She thought back to a time long before the house, before the marriage, before anyone judged her worth. She remembered being young and realizing something most people learn too late. Security does not come from being chosen by others. It comes from building something that cannot be taken from you. Her journey had started quietly. No big announcements. No shortcuts. She learned by observing. She listened more than she spoke. She asked questions when no one was watching. She studied systems, not people. Patterns, not promises. While others chased quick success, she chose patience. Her first steps were small. Careful investments. Long-term decisions. She worked with people who valued silence as much as results. Everything was documented, protected, and layered. Nothing was left exposed. Over time, what she built grew beyond expectations. Not overnight, not through luck, but through discipline. She understood risk, but she never rushed into it. Every move had purpose. She never spoke about it. Not to friends, not to family, not even to the man she married. Some secrets are not kept out of dishonesty, but out of survival. She had seen what money did to people, how it changed the way they listened, how it replaced respect with entitlement. She did not want that life. So when she met her future husband, she presented only what she wanted him to see. A calm presence, a steady partner, someone who valued peace over power. At first, He seemed to appreciate that. He liked how grounded she was, how little drama followed her. But over time, his world began to shape him again. Expectations, pressure, his mother's influence, and slowly, the space between them grew. Looking back now, she understood that the marriage didn't fail in one moment. It faded through many small silences. As the sun rose, her phone rang. She answered without hesitation. The voice on the other end was professional, respectful. Updates were given, timelines confirmed, legal positions reviewed. Everything was exactly where it should be. She thanked them and ended the call. There was no panic in her chest, no fear of the future, only a sense of control returning to its rightful place. Later that day, she stepped outside. The air felt different, lighter. She walked through the city unnoticed, just another face among many. That anonymity had always been her shield. She stopped at a small cafe and sat by herself. People around her laughed, argued, checked their phones. Normal life. It reminded her why she had chosen her path in the first place. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from her husband, short, uncertain, asking if they could talk. She stared at the screen for a moment. Then she placed the phone face down. Not now. She wasn't avoiding him out of anger. She simply knew that some conversations only matter when both people are ready to listen. He wasn't there yet. The following days were quiet. She met with professionals in private spaces, offices with no signs, rooms where discretion was standard, documents were reviewed, structure confirmed. Every asset stood separate, untouched by marriage, untouched by family influence. Her life had been designed that way for a reason. Word had not yet spread within the family. They assumed she would panic, that she would reach out, that she would ask for compromise. She did none of those things. The silence confused them. The mother expected resistance. She expected noise. When none came, irritation replaced confidence. Her husband tried calling again. This time, she answered. "I hope you're okay," he said. "I am," she replied. The simplicity of her response caught him off guard. "We should talk about the next steps," he added. "We will," she said calmly, "when the time is right." She ended the call before he could respond. That night, she stood in front of the mirror and looked at herself for a long time. Not critically, honestly. She saw someone who had endured quietly, someone who had given respect even when none was returned, someone who had waited instead of reacting. She also saw someone who no longer needed permission. The divorce process moved forward as expected. Papers filed, meetings scheduled, assumptions made. The family believed they were closing a chapter neatly. They had no idea they were about to open a door they could not shut. In private, she began preparing for visibility, not public exposure, but necessary truth. There were steps that could no longer be delayed. Banks would speak. Numbers would surface. Questions would be asked. And when that happened, silence would no longer protect them. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine life without shrinking to fit other people's expectations. Travel without explanation. Decisions without approval. Peace without tension. She felt no desire for revenge. That surprised her. What she wanted was balance. Balance between who she had been and who she was ready to become. The power she held had always been there. The difference now was timing. She had waited long enough. As the days passed, subtle shifts began to happen. Calls went unanswered. Meetings were postponed. The family's confidence began to crack. They didn't know why yet, but they would soon. And when they did, they would finally understand that the quiet woman they dismissed had never been dependent on them. She had simply chosen to stay silent. Until now, the shift began quietly. It did not start with a dramatic announcement or a public confrontation. It started with a phone call placed in a law office on the other side of the city, a call that confirmed documents were ready to be presented. Her husband's family believed the divorce would be simple. They assumed she had no strong legal standing, no financial leverage, no protection beyond what they allowed her. Their lawyers had prepared what they thought was a clean separation. Then the review process began. When financial disclosures were requested, the first surprise appeared. Accounts that were not joint, investments that had no connection to the marriage, holdings registered under legal entities that carried her signature alone. At first, the family's legal team assumed it was a minor detail, perhaps some small inheritance, perhaps a personal savings account. They were wrong. The numbers kept growing. International portfolios, long-term assets, private equity stakes, properties held through structured trusts, technology investments made years ago that had multiplied quietly in value. Each file that surfaced added another layer of disbelief. The total valuation was not something that could be dismissed. $30 billion. When the number was spoken aloud in a conference room, there was a long silence. Her husband stared at the documents as if they belonged to someone else. His mother leaned back slowly, her confidence draining in real time. "This must be a mistake," she said. It wasn't. Verification followed verification. Independent confirmations. Official records. Everything was legal. Everything was clear. And most importantly, everything existed long before the marriage. There would be no access, no claim, no control. The power balance shifted in a single afternoon. For years, they had viewed her as dependent. Now they were sitting in a room realizing she had never relied on them for anything. Her husband felt something close to panic, not because of greed, but because of shock. He began replaying every conversation in his mind. Every time she stayed quiet, every time she chose not to argue. He realized she had never needed to fight for position in that house. She had always been standing on higher ground. The mother, however, reacted differently. Her pride refused to accept the reality immediately. She questioned motives. She questioned timing. She questioned character. But the documents did not respond to emotion. They simply existed. Meanwhile, she remained calm. When her own legal team informed her that the financial disclosures had been acknowledged, she nodded once and thanked them. "Proceed as planned," she said. There was no celebration in her voice, no satisfaction, just steadiness. The news did not stay private for long. In families built around status, information moves quickly. A relative overheard something. A staff member noticed unusual meetings. Whispers began to form. Within days, the same relatives who once pitted her now avoided speaking carelessly around her name. Respect born from wealth is never pure, but it is immediate. Her husband requested to meet her in person. This time, she agreed. They sat across from each other in a quiet office. No family members. No audience. He looked tired. Not angry. Not defensive. Just overwhelmed. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. She studied his face before answering. "Would it have changed anything?" He opened his mouth to respond, then stopped. He knew the answer. If he had known from the beginning, his mother would have treated her differently. The family would have acted differently. The marriage would have been shaped by money, not connection. "That's exactly why," she said softly. He lowered his eyes. "I never married you for your family's position," she continued. "I wanted a simple life. I wanted honesty." The word hung between them. Honesty, not about money, but about courage, about standing beside your partner when it matters. He realized too late that silence had cost him more than pride. The legal process moved forward with new understanding. There would be no financial dispute, no negotiations over assets. Everything was clearly separated. Her independence was not just emotional. It was structured, protected. The mother requested a private meeting as well. That meeting was shorter. The older woman sat upright, her usual authority slightly weakened. "You misled us," she said firmly. "I never claimed anything that wasn't true," she replied calmly. "You allowed us to believe. I allowed you to assume." Silence followed. For the first time, the mother had no prepared speech. There was nothing to criticize, no weakness to point at, only a realization that she had underestimated someone she never tried to understand. The mother's power had always depended on controlling narratives inside her home. This narrative was no longer hers. Outside those walls, the world already knew who the quiet woman was. Business publications began connecting dots. Analysts referenced early investments that had shaped entire industries. Her name, once absent from headlines, appeared in controlled, factual reports. She did not give interviews. She did not release statements. She allowed the facts to speak for themselves. Back at the family home, tension turned into discomfort. Staff members watched carefully. Relatives stopped offering opinions. Her husband walked through rooms that once felt secure and now felt uncertain. He understood something clearly now. She had never been small. They had simply been too loud to see it. As final documents were prepared, the divorce became less about separation and more about reflection. She signed her portion without hesitation. When the pen left the paper, she felt something settle inside her. Not victory, not revenge, closure. The family expected anger from her, perhaps even public embarrassment in return. She gave them neither. True strength, she believed, does not need noise. On the day everything became official, she walked out of the building alone. No cameras waited. No dramatic scene unfolded. Just a woman stepping into open air with her future fully intact. Behind her, in offices and conference rooms, people continued processing the reality of what had happened. The quiet daughter-in-law they dismissed had been one of the most powerful individuals in the room all along, and she never once needed to say it. The truth had revealed itself without her raising her voice. And that was enough. The weeks after the divorce passed more quietly than anyone expected. There were no dramatic headlines, no public arguments, no interviews filled with accusations. Life simply moved forward, and she moved with it. She settled into a new routine, one built entirely on her own choices. Mornings were slower now. She woke up without alarms, made breakfast without rushing, and enjoyed the calm that once felt impossible. The tension that lived in her shoulders for years slowly faded. For the first time in a long while, her days belonged to her. She moved into a home that reflected who she truly was. Not overly large, not designed to impress, just peaceful. Light entered freely, and silence felt welcoming instead of heavy. Every corner was intentional. People around her noticed a change. She smiled more, but it wasn't the polite smile she used before. It was genuine. Relaxed. Her phone still rang often. Business matters continued, as they always had. Meetings, approvals, decisions that shaped companies and livelihoods. She handled them with the same calm focus she always had. Power had never changed her behavior. Freedom simply gave her more space to breathe. From a distance, her former husband watched her life continue without him. At first, he believed time would soften things, that perhaps they could fix what had broken. But as days turned into weeks, he began to understand something painful. She was not healing from the divorce. She was thriving. That realization hurt more than any argument ever could. He reached out once more, asking to talk. Not about money, not about the past. Just understand. She agreed to meet. They sat across from each other in a quiet public space. No tension, no anger. Just two people who once shared a life. "I didn't realize how strong you were," he said. She listened without reacting. "I think you always knew," she replied. "You just didn't choose to stand beside it." He looked down, accepting the truth without defense. "I hope you're happy," he said. "I am," she answered. "And I hope you find peace too." There was no bitterness in her voice, no hidden meaning, just honesty. They parted without promises or regrets spoken aloud. Some things don't need to be explained to be understood. As for his mother, she struggled in silence. The control she once held no longer felt secure. People treated her differently now, not with disrespect, but with distance. Power shifts have a way of changing how others listen. She never received an apology. She never asked for one. Apologies given out of fear rarely carry meaning. Instead, the woman focused forward. She began supporting causes that mattered to her, quietly funding education, health initiatives, and opportunities for people who had been overlooked just as she once was. She didn't attach her name to these efforts. She didn't seek recognition. Impact mattered more than attention. Sometimes, she would sit alone in the evenings and reflect on how much her life had changed, not because of wealth, but because she no longer had to shrink herself to keep others comfortable. She understood now that silence could be powerful, but voice is necessary when silence begins to cost your peace. The story of her divorce slowly became something people whispered about, a lesson shared quietly among social circles. A reminder not to judge too quickly, not to assume power always announces itself. Those who truly knew the truth spoke about her with respect, not because of her wealth, but because of her restraint. She never used her resources to embarrass the family that once dismissed her. She never tried to rewrite the past publicly. She let life speak instead, and life spoke clearly. Months later, she stood on a balcony overlooking a city far from where her marriage had ended. The air was warm, the sky open. She felt no weight on her chest, only gratitude. Gratitude for patience, gratitude for clarity, gratitude for strength it took to remain calm when others tried to define her worth. She had learned that true independence is not about standing alone. It is about knowing you can. Her story was never about proving anyone wrong. It was about choosing herself. And in doing so, she gained something far more valuable than money: peace. As the night settled in, she turned away from the view and stepped back inside, closing the door gently behind her. The past no longer followed her. She had already walked beyond it.